During dinner, my grandson shouted, "Shut up, old woman," and threw his glass on the floor. Everyone laughed. The next day, the college called. The tuition payment had been canceled. He never knew who had been paying. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I'm 71 years old, and I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. The dining room at my daughter Linda's house was warm that Sunday evening, filled with the smell of roast chicken and the sound of family chatter. Everyone was there: Linda and her husband Mark, my grandson Austin, and my youngest daughter Sarah with her 2 kids. It should have been perfect. It should have been one of those moments I'd treasure. Instead, it became the night that changed everything. Austin was 22, tall and lean like his father, with that confident swagger that comes from never having to worry about money. He'd been complaining about his sociology professor for the past 10 minutes, his voice getting louder and more agitated with each word. "The guy's an idiot, I swear. He marked down my paper just because I didn't cite some obscure book from 1987. Like, who even reads that stuff anymore?" I set down my fork gently. "Maybe he was trying to teach you about thorough research, honey. When I was your age." "Shut up, old lady." Austin's voice cut through the room like a blade. The words hit me so hard I actually felt my chest tighten. "Nobody asked for your opinion about college. You never even went to one." The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Austin picked up his water glass and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, water and glass spraying everywhere. That's when they started laughing. Not gasps of shock. Not scolding words. Laughter. Linda covered her mouth, trying to hide her giggles. Mark shook his head with amusement. Sarah's kids started giggling too, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. "Austin, you're terrible," Linda said, but she was still smiling. "Mom, you know how he gets when he's stressed about school." I sat there, staring at the broken glass on the floor, feeling something inside me break just as cleanly. The water was seeping into the carpet, and I watched it spread, thinking about how some stains never come out no matter how hard you scrub. "I should help clean that up," I whispered, starting to stand. No, sit down, Mom." Linda waved me off. "Austin can get it later." "Can't you, sweetie?" Austin was already back to eating like nothing had happened. "Yeah, whatever." I remained in my chair, my hands folded in my lap, trying to keep them from shaking. Nobody seemed to notice that I hadn't taken another bite of food. Nobody seemed to care that their 71-year-old mother and grandmother had just been told to shut up by a 22-year-old who'd never worked a day in his life. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been paying Austin's college tuition for 3 years. Every month, I wrote a check for $2,800. I'd been doing it since he started at the state university, telling the school I was an anonymous benefactor who wanted to help a deserving student. That money came from my Social Security, from the small pension I got from 30 years of working at the phone company, and from the savings I'd built up over decades of careful living. I'd been eating generic cereal for breakfast and buying clothes from thrift stores so Austin could go to college without student loans. I'd been doing it because I loved him, because I wanted him to have opportunities one never had, because I believed that education was the greatest gift I could give him. Now, sitting at that table with the taste of humiliation bitter in my mouth, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. Austin didn't see me as family. He saw me as an obstacle, an old woman who talked too much and knew too little. The conversation moved on around me. Mark started talking about his golf game. Sarah mentioned something about her kids' school project. Austin pulled out his phone and started texting, probably complaining to his friends about his annoying grandmother. I finished my meal in silence, helped clear the table without being asked, and gave everyone their usual hugs goodbye. Austin didn't even look up from his phone when I kissed his forehead. "Drive safe, Mom," Linda called as I walked to my car. "Love you." I drove home to my small apartment, my hand steady on the wheel but my mind racing. I kept hearing Austin's voice. "Shut up, old lady." I kept seeing the laughter in their eyes. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my checkbook and a calculator. I added up everything I'd spent on Austin over the past 3 years. Tuition, books, his car insurance that I'd been paying without him knowing, the credit card I'd opened in my name for his emergencies. The total was $84,600. $84,600 to raise a young man who thought I was worth less than a broken glass on the floor. I closed the checkbook and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark thinking about respect and love and the difference between the two. I thought about my late husband Robert, who'd never once raised his voice to me in 43 years of marriage. I thought about the life I'd built, the dignity I'd maintained, and the moment it had all been stripped away by someone I'd sacrificed everything for. By morning I knew exactly what I had to do. The next day I made 3 phone calls. First to the university's billing department, then to the credit card company, then to the insurance company. Austin had no idea what was coming. The first call came at 9:47 on Monday morning. I was watering my small herb garden on the balcony when my phone rang. Linda's number flashed on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. I wasn't ready to pretend everything was normal after what had happened at dinner. Mom! Linda's voice was tight with confusion. Did you hear from Austin today? I set down my watering can and kept my voice perfectly level. No, honey. Why? Something's wrong with his school payments. They called him this morning saying his tuition wasn't paid for this semester. He's freaking out because they're threatening to drop him from his classes. I felt a small flutter in my chest, not guilt, but something closer to satisfaction. That's terrible. Maybe there was a mix-up with financial aid. That's what we thought. But Austin says he never applied for financial aid. He's been telling us for 3 years that he got some kind of anonymous scholarship. Now the school is saying there's no record of any scholarship under his name. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. How strange. Mom, I hate to ask, but could you maybe help him out? Just this once? Mark's been laid off for 2 months, and we're barely covering our own bills. Austin's worked so hard to get this far in school. Worked so hard. I almost laughed out loud. Austin had never worked a day in his life. He'd spent the last 3 years going to parties, buying expensive clothes, and treating college like an extended vacation, all funded by his grandmother's retirement money. Linda, sweetheart, I wish I could help, but you know how tight things are on my fixed income. I've been cutting back on everything just to make ends meet. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had been cutting back to pay for Austin's education. I understand, Mom. I just thought maybe. Never mind. I'll figure something out. After she hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. This time it was Austin himself. Grandma Joyce. His voice was different than it had been at dinner. Higher. Desperate. I really need to talk to you. Of course, dear. What's wrong? Something crazy is happening. The school is saying I owe them money, but I've never had to pay tuition before. There was this anonymous donor who was covering everything, but now they're saying that person stopped paying. My car insurance got canceled too, and my credit card was declined this morning. I don't understand what's happening. I listened to him panic, remembering how he'd looked at me 2 nights ago when he told me to shut up. How he'd thrown that glass against the wall like a toddler having a tantrum. That does sound very confusing, Austin. Grandma. I was wondering. I know you don't have much, but could you maybe loan me something? Just to get through this semester? I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I graduate and get a job. The same grandson who'd called me an old lady was now asking for money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Austin. I'm living on Social Security and a small pension. I barely have enough to cover my own expenses. Maybe you should look into getting a job to help pay for school. There was a long silence. Then, a job? Grandma, I'm a full-time student. I don't have time for a job. Besides, I've never had to work before. I don't even know how to look for one. 22 years old and he didn't know how to look for a job. I'd been working since I was 15, lying about my age to get hired at the local diner. But Austin had been so sheltered, so protected from reality, that the idea of earning his own money was completely foreign to him. Maybe this is a good opportunity to learn, I said gently. But Grandma, if I don't pay tuition by Friday, they're going to kick me out of school. I've got 2 more semesters until I graduate. I can't quit now. I could hear the real fear in his voice. For the first time in his life, Austin was facing consequences. Real consequences that couldn't be laughed off or ignored. Have you talked to your parents about this? Dad's out of work, and Mom says they can't help. She suggested I talk to you. He paused. Grandma, you've always been there for our family. I know I can count on you. Always been there for the family. The words should have warmed my heart, but instead they made me angry. I had always been there with my checkbook, my time, my unconditional love. And where had it gotten me? Austin, I'm sorry, but I just don't have that kind of money. What about your savings? Don't you have anything put away? The entitlement in his voice was stunning. He was asking me to drain my life savings for him. The same young man who couldn't be bothered to show me basic respect. My savings are for emergencies, dear. Medical bills, home repairs, things like that. This is an emergency. My whole future is at stake. His future. Not once did he ask about my future, my security, my needs. It was all about him, just like it had always been. I'm sorry, Austin. I wish I could help, but I can't. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time since Austin was born, I wasn't worried about his problems. I wasn't frantically trying to figure out how to fix things for him. He was going to have to figure it out himself. My phone rang twice more that afternoon, once from Sarah asking if I'd heard about Austin's crisis, and once from Linda begging me to reconsider helping him. Both times I maintained my story. I simply didn't have the money. That evening I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I balanced my checkbook and realized I had an extra $2,800 in my account. Money that would have gone to Austin's tuition. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called a travel agent. It was time to start living for myself. 2 weeks passed and Austin's world was crumbling. I watched it happen from a distance, like observing a storm from the safety of my living room window. Linda called me every few days with updates, her voice increasingly strained. He's been applying for jobs everywhere, Mom. Fast food places, retail stores, even that new coffee shop downtown. But nobody wants to hire someone with no work experience. I made sympathetic noises while folding laundry. That must be frustrating for him. He's never had to do this before. He doesn't even know how to write a resume. Mark tried to help him, but Austin got so angry he stormed out of the house. Of course he did. Austin had spent 22 years having everything handed to him. The idea that he might actually have to work for something was completely foreign to him. Maybe the career center at his school could help? I suggested, knowing full well that Austin had already been dropped from his classes for non-payment. That's the thing, Mom. They kicked him out last Friday. He's not technically a student anymore, so he can't use any of the school services. I felt a pang of something, not quite guilt, but recognition of how serious this had become. Austin had been 3 semesters away from graduating with his sociology degree. Now he was unemployed, uneducated, and completely unprepared for the real world. But then I remembered Sunday dinner. I remembered his voice saying, "Shut up, old lady." I remembered the laughter that followed. "I'm sure he'll figure something out," I said. The next call came from Sarah. My younger daughter had always been the mediator in our family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts and keep everyone happy. "Mom, I'm worried about Austin. Linda says he's been sleeping until noon and then staying up all night playing video games. He's acting like none of this is real. Growing up is hard," I replied, watering my plants. "Sometimes we have to learn lessons the difficult way. But Mom, he's family. Shouldn't we be helping him through this?" Family. The word had lost some of its power over me. "Sarah, what exactly do you think I should do? I'm 71 years old, living on a fixed income. I can't wave a magic wand and make Austin's problems disappear." I know. It's just, he's so lost right now. Yesterday he asked me if I thought he could make money selling his video games. He has no idea how the world works. That was exactly the problem. Austin had no idea how the world worked because no one had ever required him to learn. He'd been protected and coddled and financially supported by someone he didn't even know existed. "Maybe this is exactly what he needs," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Maybe Austin needs to learn that actions have consequences. That respect is earned, not given. That you can't treat people badly and expect them to keep supporting you." There was a long pause. "Mom, did something happen at dinner that night? You've seemed different since then." I almost told her. I almost explained about the humiliation, the broken glass, the years of secret payments. But Sarah hadn't been there. She hadn't seen the laughter, Hadn't felt the sting of being dismissed by someone I'd sacrificed everything for. I'm just tired of everyone expecting me to solve problems that aren't mine to solve, I said instead. 3 weeks after the tuition crisis began, Austin showed up at my apartment. I was surprised to find him at my door on a Tuesday afternoon. He looked terrible unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in the week before, his usual cocky expression replaced by something closer to desperation. "Hi, Grandma," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He'd never visited my apartment before, and I watched him look around with barely concealed surprise. It was small, clean, and modest, the home of someone who'd learned to live within her means. "Would you like some tea?" I offered. "Sure." He sat heavily on my couch, running his hands through his unwashed hair. "Grandma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I settled into my favorite chair, the one by the window where I did my reading. "Of course, dear. Mom and Aunt Sarah keep saying you don't have money to help me, but I've been thinking about it and that doesn't make sense. You own this apartment, right? And you worked for 30 years. You must have savings." Here it was, the direct confrontation I'd been expecting. "Austin, I live on Social Security and a small pension. After I pay for food, utilities, medication, and basic living expenses, there's very little left over. But what about emergencies? What if something happens to you? That's exactly why I need to keep what little savings I have." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "Grandma, I'm desperate here. I've applied to probably 50 jobs in the past 3 weeks. Nobody will hire me. I don't have a college degree, I don't have experience, and I'm starting to think I never will." I studied his face. For the first time since I'd known him, Austin looked genuinely scared. Not angry, not entitled, but frightened of what his future might hold. "Maybe you could start with something smaller," I suggested. "Part-time work while you figure out your next step." I tried that too. Even the grocery store said they wanted someone with customer service experience. How am I supposed to get experience if nobody will give me a chance? It was a fair question, and I felt a flicker of sympathy for him. But then I remembered why we were here in the first place. "Austin, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you remember what you said to me at dinner 3 weeks ago?" He frowned, genuinely confused. "What dinner?" "At your parents' house. You were complaining about your professor, and I tried to offer some advice." His frown deepened. "I don't really remember." "Why?" He didn't even remember. The moment that had changed everything for me was so insignificant to him that it had completely disappeared from his memory. "You told me to shut up," I said quietly. "You called me an old lady and threw a glass against the wall." Everyone laughed. Austin's face went pale. I said that." "Yes, you did." "Grandma, I'm sorry. I was stressed about school, and sometimes I say things when I'm frustrated. I didn't mean anything by it. Didn't mean anything by it." As if the pain of being dismissed by your own grandson was something you could just brush off and forget. "Austin, I've been thinking a lot about respect lately, about how we treat the people who love us." He shifted uncomfortably. "I do respect you, Grandma. You know that." "Do I?" Because respect isn't just about saying the right words. It's about how you behave when you think nobody's watching. It's about recognizing that other people have feelings and dignity that matter just as much as yours. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Are you saying you won't help me because I hurt your feelings?" The question revealed everything that was wrong with Austin's understanding of the world. He saw this as a transaction. Apologize for hurting feelings, receive money in return. He still didn't understand that this was about something much deeper than hurt feelings. This was about the man he'd become, and the man he'd have to choose to be. The pressure from my family intensified as Austin's situation grew more desperate. It had been 6 weeks since I'd cut off his funding, and the ripple effects were spreading through our family like cracks in a foundation. Linda called me almost daily now, her voice strained with worry and frustration. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something serious," she said during one of our Thursday evening calls. I was sitting in my kitchen, working on a crossword puzzle, trying to maintain some normalcy in the chaos that had become our family dynamics. "What is it, honey?" "It's about Austin. And about money." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. Mark got hired at the hardware store, but it's only part-time minimum wage. We're barely keeping our heads above water as it is. I set down my pen. I'm glad Mark found something. The thing is, Austin is living with us again. He can't afford his apartment anymore, and he's been eating our food, using our utilities. We can't really afford to support him, but we can't kick him out either. He's our son. I felt a familiar weight settling on my shoulders, the expectation that I would somehow fix this problem. What do you want me to do, Linda? I know you say you don't have money saved up, but Mom, there has to be something. Maybe you could take out a loan against your apartment? Or cash in some of those savings bonds Dad left you. The savings bonds. I'd forgotten that Linda knew about those. Robert had bought them for us over the years, small amounts tucked away for our retirement. I'd been saving them for a real emergency, major medical expenses, long-term care, the kind of crisis that could wipe out an elderly person's entire nest egg. Linda, those bonds are my security. If something happens to me, if I need medical care or have to go into assisted living, that money is all I have. But Mom, you're healthy. You could always buy more bonds later, once Austin gets back on his feet and starts paying you back. Paying me back. As if Austin had ever paid anyone back for anything in his 22 years of life. I can't do that, honey. I'm sorry. Mom, please. I'm begging you. Austin is falling apart. He stays in his room all day, he won't shower, he won't look for work anymore. Yesterday I found him crying in the bathroom. He said he feels like his life is over. The image of Austin crying should have moved me. A few months ago it would have. But now I felt something different. A hard kernel of resolve that had formed in my chest and refused to budge. Maybe his life as he knew it is over, I said quietly. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Linda was quiet for a long moment. What do you mean? I mean, maybe Austin needed to learn that the world doesn't owe him anything. That respect and support have to be earned. Mom, you're talking about your own grandson like he's some kind of stranger. Am I? Because lately I feel like I don't know him at all. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Linda promising to call me back later. She didn't. Instead, Sarah called me the next day. Mom, Linda told me about your conversation yesterday. She's really upset. I was reorganizing my spice cabinet, a task I'd been putting off for months. It felt good to have something concrete to focus on. I'm sorry she's upset, but I meant what I said. Look, I know Austin has problems. He's immature, he's been spoiled. He doesn't understand how hard life can be. But Mom, he's still just a kid. He's 22 years old, Sarah. When I was 22, I was married, working full-time, and taking care of your father when he hurt his back. 22 isn't a kid anymore. But you had to grow up fast because of your circumstances. Austin hasn't had to face real challenges before. Exactly. And whose fault is that? Sarah was quiet for a moment. You think we failed him? I think we protected him from consequences for so long that he never learned how to be a decent human being. And now everyone expects me to keep protecting him. Mom, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you have money that you could use to help Austin? I stopped organizing spices and sat down at my kitchen table. This was the question I'd been dreading, because it would require me to either lie to my daughter or reveal a secret I'd kept for 3 years. Why do you ask? Because something doesn't add up. Austin told me he had this anonymous benefactor paying for his college. Someone who covered his tuition, his books, even his car insurance. But now that person has disappeared, and Austin's life is falling apart. My heart started beating faster. That's an interesting story. Mom, I've been thinking about this for weeks. Who would have that kind of money to just give away? Who would care enough about Austin to pay for his education without wanting credit for it? I said nothing. I keep coming back to the same conclusion. It was you, wasn't it? The question hung in the air between us. I could lie, but Sarah had always been the smartest of my children. She'd figured it out on her own. Why would you think that? Because you love him. Because you've always been the one to sacrifice for this family. Because you worked 30 years at a job you hated to save money for your retirement, and you've been living like a monk for the past 3 years. She was right. I had been living like a monk, cutting every possible expense so I could afford Austin's education. I'd been eating generic everything, buying my clothes at thrift stores, never going out to dinner or taking vacations. Sarah, I can't have this conversation right now. Mom, if you were paying for Austin's college, and you stopped because he hurt your feelings, then you need to start again. You can't punish a kid for the rest of his life because he said something stupid. It wasn't just something stupid, Sarah. It was a pattern. Years of being taken for granted, of being treated like I don't matter. So you're going to let him throw his life away? I'm going to let him figure out that his life is his own responsibility. Sarah's voice got sharp. You're 71 years old, Mom. How much time do you have left to hold grudges? The question hit me like a physical blow. How much time did I have left? And did I want to spend it being angry at my grandson? Or did I want to spend it living the life I'd never allowed myself to have? I need to go, Sarah. Mom, please. Just think about it. Austin may not deserve your help, but he's still family. And family forgives. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and family, and the difference between enabling someone and loving them. Outside my window, I could see the travel brochures I'd collected over the past few weeks. Ireland, where my grandparents had been born. Italy, where I'd always dreamed of seeing the art. Hawaii, where Robert and I had planned to go for our 50th anniversary before cancer took him. I had choices to make. And for the first time in my life, I was going to make them based on what I wanted, not what everyone else expected from me. The truth came out on a rainy Thursday in October, exactly 2 months after I'd stopped paying Austin's bills. I was reading in my living room when someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of desperate, urgent hammering that made my heart race with worry that something terrible had happened. I opened the door to find Austin standing in the hallway, soaking wet from the rain. His eyes red and wild with a mixture of anger and desperation I'd never seen before. I know it was you, he said, pushing past me into my apartment without being invited. I figured it out. I closed the door slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. Austin, you're dripping on my carpet. Let me get you a towel. I don't want a towel. He spun around to face me, water droplets flying from his hair. I want you to admit what you did to me. What did I do to you? You were the anonymous donor, weren't you? You were paying for my college, my car insurance, my credit card. You were supporting me for 3 years and then you just stopped. You destroyed my life out of spite. I walked to my linen closet and pulled out a clean towel, holding it out to him. He didn't take it. Austin, you're upset. Why don't you sit down and we can talk about this calmly? I don't want to sit down. I want you to tell me why you did this to me. Why you ruined everything. I set the towel on the coffee table and settled into my chair. How did you figure it out? Does it matter? The point is, you lied to me. To everyone. You made me think I had this scholarship, this benefactor who believed in me. But it was just you manipulating me the whole time. Manipulating you? Yes. You were controlling my life with your money, and the second I did something you didn't like, you cut me off. That's manipulation. I stared at him, this young man I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for, and felt something inside me turn cold. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't see past his own entitlement. Austin, do you remember what you said to me at dinner that night? Oh my God, are you still hung up on that? I apologized. No, you didn't. You said you were sorry I got my feelings hurt. That's not the same thing as apologizing. He threw his hands up in frustration. Fine. I'm sorry I told you to shut up. I'm sorry I hurt your precious feelings. Are you happy now? Can you start paying for my stuff again? The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that an apology was just a transaction that would restore his access to my money, made me feel sick. Austin, sit down. Please. Something in my voice must have gotten through to him, because he finally stopped pacing and collapsed onto my couch. He looked exhausted, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. I'm going to tell you something, I said quietly, and I want you to listen without interrupting. He nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. For 3 years I paid $2,800 every month for your education. That money came from my Social Security, from my pension, and from the savings your grandfather and I built up over 43 years of marriage. Austin's eyes widened, but he stayed quiet. I did it because I loved you. Because I wanted you to have opportunities one never had. Because I believed that education was the most valuable gift I could give you. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But Austin, love isn't just about giving. It's also about receiving. And for 3 years, while I was sacrificing everything for your future, you never once treated me with respect or kindness. That's not true, he said, but his voice was weak. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you asked about my health, my feelings, my life? When was the last time you thanked me for anything? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I've been paying your bills for 3 years, Austin. I've been eating generic cereal and shopping at thrift stores so you could go to college without debt. And in all that time, you never once wondered how I could afford to be so generous. You never asked if I was okay, if I needed anything, if my sacrifices were costing me more than I could afford. Tears started rolling down his cheeks. Grandma, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You took my love for granted. You assumed it would always be there, no matter how badly you treated me. But I do love you, he whispered. Do you? Because love isn't just a feeling, Austin. It's also an action. It's treating people with respect and kindness. It's considering their needs and feelings, not just your own. He was crying harder now, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm really truly sorry. I know I've been selfish and stupid. I know I hurt you. But please, please don't give up on me. I can change. I can be better. I looked at this young man who'd been such a central part of my life for 22 years. I saw his genuine remorse, his fear, his desperate need for forgiveness. But I also saw something else, the expectation that his apology would fix everything, that I would resume my role as his secret benefactor. Austin, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. What do you mean? I mean that you need to learn to stand on your own. You need to understand that respect is earned, not given. You need to become the kind of man who deserves the love and support of his family. But how am I supposed to do that without help? I don't have money for school, I can't find a job, I don't know how to do anything. The same way I learned, Austin. The same way millions of people learn every day. By starting at the bottom and working your way up. By taking responsibility for your choices. By treating other people with dignity and respect, even when they can't do anything for you. He stared at me for a long moment. So you're not going to help me? I'm helping you right now. I'm teaching you the most important lesson anyone ever taught me. That you have to earn your place in the world. That nobody owes you anything just because you exist. Austin stood up slowly. His face a mixture of hurt and anger. So that's it? 22 years of being your grandson means nothing. Being my grandson means everything. That's why I'm doing this. He walked to the door, then turned back to face me. You know what, Grandma? Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been selfish and spoiled. But you know what else? You're cruel. You had the power to save me, and you chose not to. I'll remember that. He left without another word, and I sat in my quiet apartment listening to the rain against my windows. My heart was breaking, but for the first time in years my conscience was clear. I had finally chosen love over enabling. Even if Austin couldn't see the difference yet. 3 years passed before I heard from Austin again. Those 3 years were the best of my life since Robert died. I used the money I'd been spending on Austin's education to finally live the life I'd postponed for so long. I went to Ireland and walked the countryside where my grandparents had grown up. I took a cooking class and learned to make pasta from scratch. I joined a book club and made friends who valued my opinions instead of dismissing them. I bought myself new clothes. Not from thrift stores but from real department stores. I got my hair done every month at a proper salon. I took weekend trips to museums and gardens I'd always wanted to visit, but never felt I could afford. For the first time since I was a teenager, I was living for myself. Linda and Sarah gradually stopped pressuring me about Austin. Linda told me he'd moved out of their house after 6 months and was working at a warehouse across town. Sarah mentioned that he'd gotten his own apartment. A small studio in a rough neighborhood, but it was his. Neither of them asked me for money anymore, which was a relief I hadn't expected. I heard bits and pieces about Austin's life through family conversations. He'd started taking night classes at the community college, paying his own tuition with money from his warehouse job. He'd learned to cook basic meals and do his own laundry. He'd gotten a promotion to shift supervisor after 18 months of reliable work. I felt proud of him, but I also felt proud of myself for having the strength to let him learn these lessons on his own. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was watering my plants when my phone rang, and Austin's name appeared on the screen for the first time in 3 years. "Hello, Austin," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Hi, Grandma." His voice was different, deeper, more mature. "I was wondering if I could come see you. There's something I need to say to you in person." "Of course. When would you like to come? Would this weekend work?" "Saturday afternoon." I agreed and spent the next few days wondering what he wanted to tell me. Had he gotten engaged? Graduated from community college? Found a better job? Or was this another attempt to get money from me? Saturday arrived gray and drizzly. I made a pot of coffee and waited. When Austin knocked on my door at exactly 2 o'clock, I was surprised by how different he looked. He was thinner, more muscular from his physical job. His clothes were simple but clean and well-fitted. His hair was shorter, more professional. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They held a seriousness I'd never seen before. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Thank you." He wiped his feet carefully on my doormat and followed me into the living room. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you." I poured 2 cups and settled into my chair. Austin sat on the edge of the couch, holding his mug with both hands like he was trying to warm himself. "You look well," I said. "Thank you. So do you." He glanced around my apartment, noticing the new furniture, the framed photographs from my travels. "You've redecorated." "I've been doing some traveling, making some changes." He nodded. "I heard you went to Ireland. Mom showed me the pictures. It looked beautiful." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Austin set down his coffee cup and looked directly at me. "Grandma, I need to tell you something. Actually, several things." "I'm listening." "First, I want to apologize. Not for hurting your feelings, but for who I was. For 3 years, you paid for my entire life, and I never once wondered where that money was coming from. I never asked if you were okay, if you needed anything, if you could afford to be so generous. I was completely selfish." I said nothing, but I could feel my heart starting to soften. "Second, I want to thank you. Not just for the money, but for cutting me off when you did. I was angry about it for a long time. I thought you were being cruel and vindictive. But you were right. I needed to learn how to take care of myself." "How has that been for you?" I asked quietly. Austin smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. "Hard. Really hard. That first year was the worst year of my life. I had to learn everything from scratch, how to budget money, how to cook, how to show up to work every day even when I didn't feel like it. I failed at a lot of things. But you didn't give up. I wanted to many times. But I kept thinking about what you said about earning my place in the world. And slowly, things started to get better." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I graduated from community college last month. Associate degree in business administration. I'm transferring to the state university in the fall to finish my bachelor's degree." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Austin, that's wonderful. I'm paying my own tuition this time. It'll take me longer because I can only afford to take 2 classes per semester while I work, but I'll get there." He paused. "I wanted you to be the first person to see my diploma." He handed me the envelope, and I opened it with shaking hands. There was his diploma, and underneath it, a handwritten letter. "Dear Grandma Joyce," I read aloud. "Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Thank you for teaching me that respect is earned, not given. Thank you for showing me that real love sometimes means saying no. I hope someday I can be the kind of man who deserves your pride. Love, Austin." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "You already are that kind of man. I have something else to show you." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. "This is Maria. We've been dating for 8 months. The picture showed Austin with a young woman who had kind eyes and a genuine smile. They were both wearing aprons and laughing at something off camera. "She's beautiful. Where did you meet her?" "At work. She's a single mom, working her way through nursing school. She's the hardest working person I've ever met, and she doesn't take any nonsense from me." He grinned. "I think you'd like her. I'd love to meet her. Actually, that's what I wanted to ask you. Would you like to have dinner with us next weekend? Nothing fancy, just home cooking at my place. I learned how to make a decent pot roast. I looked at my grandson, really looked at him, and saw not the entitled young man who'd told me to shut up 3 years ago, but a mature adult who'd learned to value hard work, respect, and genuine relationships. I would love that, I said. Austin stood up and came over to my chair. For a moment, I thought he was going to ask for a hug. Instead, he knelt beside my chair and took my hands in his. Grandma, I know I can't undo the past 3 years. I know I hurt you badly, and I know trust has to be earned. But I want you to know that you saved my life by cutting me off. You taught me lessons I never would have learned any other way. You saved your own life, Austin. I just got out of your way. He smiled. Maybe we both did what we needed to do. As I watched him leave that afternoon, walking with the confident stride of someone who'd learned to depend on himself, I felt a deep sense of peace. I'd chosen tough love over easy enabling, and it had cost us both 3 difficult years. But those years had given Austin something no amount of money could buy: self-respect, and the knowledge that he could handle whatever life threw at him. I settled back into my chair with a cup of tea and my latest travel brochure. I was thinking about taking a cruise to Alaska in the summer. After all, I had the time, the money, and most importantly, the freedom to choose my own adventures. And now, I also had my grandson back. Not as someone who needed rescuing, but as someone who'd learned to rescue himself.